All right, so we are streaming live now. Oh, it's always recorded also later on, Mike.
My wife wakes me up at 4:30. She usually calls from her boyfriend's house. That's a joke. That's a joke. Little joke. Okay.
Okay, so let me just get this over here. And we can pick up all the comments that are made. Here we go.
Just be sure you know you're recorded.
That's right. Being recorded now. Here we go. Okay.
Okay.
So. Okay, last we left off, we were discussing Reish Nun Tes Sif Zion. So if you're using the packet over here that you have in front of you, we're on the second side. We are where it says Zion. We're going to reread the Shulchan Aruch, but we did the Mishnah Berurah's comments. That we'll get into the Ramah with his positions and about this issue. Okay. So just make sure I can hear people who might want to talk. Okay. All right. So let's just reread it. It says Zion. Tanur shemanichim bochamin v'sosmin pivt b'daf v'sorkin be'perish machalikin oso betit. So if you have an oven, we're like knee deep in like some of the cooking related issues. So if you have an oven in which you place hot food, and this is before Shabbos, and then you close the oven with the hole of the oven with a piece of a board of wood, and you cover it. You so smooth over this board with a clay covering.
Seal it.
You basically you seal it, so you ensure that it's not just closed, but it's sort of in order to open it up, you really have to bust through the clay. Okay, so mutter listor osa, you are permitted to open this up. Mutter listor osa stima kedei lahotzi acham, in order you're permitted to sort of break down this closing in order to get to the food, and so you can enjoy your Shabbos food. And then when you're done taking whatever you want to take, you can put it back and close the oven back up with this board and whatever I guess remains of the clay covering. I don't think you can reform the clay covering on Shabbos. That's a separate problem, which I think we're actually going to touch on a little bit of bimareach, of smoothing over, because they would smooth over this clay on top of the board, so you're not allowed to redo this on Shabbos. But the assumption until now was that the coals in this oven, were no longer really burning. The heat was still, maybe the coals are still producing heat because they've gone out and they're still hot. But the idea is that they're not gechalim lo chashos, because if they were sort of hissing, right? Those gechalim, the coals are really hot and they're producing heat. So mutter al yidei eino yehudi. So then it is permissible to do this, to reclose this whole contraption with a non-Jew. They can do it for you. Okay, but we talked about last time that a Jew themselves cannot. Problem was because if you close up the oven, forget the clay. Close the oven, you are cutting off the oxygen to the cavity of this oven, and therefore the coals will go out a lot faster. One of the prohibitions on Shabbos is mechabe, to extinguish a flame, and this would be hastening the extinguishing of these coals. Okay, that was what we learned last week, at the end of last week. Let's take a look now at the Ramah, continuing right on, second to last line on the page, middle of the line, Yesh Machmir. So the Ramah says, Yesh Machmir. There are those that are stringent. Those that are stringent. Shelo listor stima satanur atuach betit al yidei Yisrael. There are those who are stringent that you're not allowed to open up to break through the clay covering and open up this oven, even if it has been layered with clay on the outside by the hands of a Jew. Why not? So we're on bottom line of page 60, Richie, where the Ramah's writing is. Why not? Why he says because in what case can I not? If it's possible to do this by a non-Jew. So what's the problem here? Let's take a look. Let's pause and look at the Mishnah Berurah, the bottom Mishnah Berurah on the page Chaf Beis. V'yesh machmirin. There are those that are stringent. Why is there even such an opinion that there's those that are stringent? We talked about previously that Shulchan Aruch says it's not a problem to break it down because yes, listor stira is a prohibition on Shabbos to take down a structure, right? To destroy a structure. But we said that's when we're talking about buildings, physical structures or parts of buildings, right? Or at least you're going to take down a wall, a closet, or whatever. You're really breaking down the structure. This is a clay covering on top of an oven. That's what they used to use in those days. That was never made to last for very long. Whether a wall or a closet or whatever, you'll figure out probably that's part of the structure of the building. This is meant to be broken, and therefore there's not even an Issa D'Rabbanan. So the Machmir opinion here says, Mishnah Berurah says, Taman, what's behind their thought process? Since it has a clay covering, Yesh Mishum Stiras Binyan. There's a little hint, maybe is a problem if you think, could be you're breaking a little bit of the clay covering, and it was built up, even temporarily. Now, by the way, at best, you're talking about a D'Rabbanan here. There's no way it's a Doraisa. Doraisa is you're really breaking down something that's a structure attached to the ground, right? Part of your house, a part of a building. This at best is a D'Rabbanan, and even that, the Ramah acknowledges if there's a non-Jew, meaning if there's no non-Jew available, do it yourself. So he's hedging his bets here. Okay. And therefore you should be machmir where it's possible. So where there's a non-Jew available, ask the non-Jew to do it. Okay. Why? What's the thought process? If it was a D'Rabbanan and you're asking a non-Jew to do a D'Rabbanan, so you have two D'Rabbanans built on top of each other, a shvus to shvus, b'mako mitzvah. Here you have a mitzvah of eating your but it's oneg Shabbos. It's your Shabbos meal. So okay, forget it. It's fine. Ask the non-Jew.
Like everyone's machmir, and I once heard Rabbi Franz speak, and he was talking about borer. Like you can't separate the peas from the carrots on your plate,
right?
Which seems like a real homer. So today people might say it smokes it, don't.
Right? Yeah. The peas and the carrots is an interesting one. We'll get there. We're gonna get there. Shit your test. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Yeah. We'll get there. Don't worry. I'll help you with both. I'll solve your both problems. There, by the way, by peas and carrots, they're distinct entities. I acknowledge there are some who are machmir on this one. But I actually don't think I'm being makel against halacha here. If you have distinct entities like peas and carrots that are there, they're distinguishable. You could take, if you had a bowl of peas and carrots, you could take your hand, and you could pick the peas out without even touching the carrots. The borer, we'll see when we get there, is going to be an issue when parts are really indistinguishable, and you can't really separate the two without some sort of I don't want to say assistance, but it becomes a lot more challenging, because where's the line between separating things, right? The Be'er Halacha talks about how can you open a banana on Shabbos? You're separating the peel from the banana. How is that possible? So his answer, by the way, is that's how it was created. That God created it as such, and therefore that's not a mixture, right? But you could even argue before that. I think I can't remember which Rosh Yeshiva was. I was in the shir. It's not a mixture. You have two very distinct items. There's a peel and there's a banana. They're not mixed up where they're attached to each other. but they're not mixed up. So we'll get to Bor. There's really what to talk about when you get to Bor. There's some serious issues that we have to be careful about on Shabbos, but we'll get there. Shin Yud Tes, a few years. Okay, we're on Rishon Tes. It's not bad. We've done a lot, by the way. If you look, we've covered 60 pages of Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Berurah, in all of Hilchot Shabbos, and we're gonna get there. We're gonna get to the whole way through. Okay, so now here comes the most controversial line of this whole shir that we're gonna have today. Go back to the Ramah. V'chein im efshar la'asoso al yedei Yisrael. By the way, here now you're gonna get a chumrah from me. Okay, v'chein im efshar la'asoso al yedei Yisrael katan. If you could do this thing where you break down the clay door to get to the food, if you could do it by a child, so lo ya'aseh Yisrael gadol, then an adult shouldn't do it.
Boy, I hate that. I really hate that. I hate when people say to their 3-year-old, you know how
You
to
break
turn the
Shabbos.
light- turn off the light on Shabbos.
So
I hate it.
I'll
Sorry.
no. I appreciate your passion, by the way, because your passion is well placed. The second to last siman in all of Hilchot Shabbos is called Dinei Katan B'Shabbos. Now, but I'm fascinated that the Mishnah Berurah nor anyone else here seems to weigh on this. And all I'll say is that if you think about what it says in the Torah, forget the Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara, but just start with the Torah. It says, "V'shamru v'nei Yisrael es haShabbos, la'asas haShabbos l'doros ha'barisot la'bnei uvein bnei Yisrael osilam ki sheish Shabbos." Okay, good. So we have a whole thing about that. That's one of the passages of Shabbos. And Yavayachulu. Okay. Another one of the key passages on Shabbos, which we don't recite upon a Kiddush, is Lo saseh chol malacha ata uvincha uvisecha. Right? Your children are not allowed to do malacha. It's a pasuk in the Torah. It's a huge incorrect assumption that we are allowed to tell our children to do something wrong on Shabbos. If you can't do it, you for sure, a Torah can't tell it. It's better to tell a non-Jew to do it. To tell your child to do it is an absolute explicit violation of the pasuk in the Torah. And that is exactly what it says. If you look in Siman Shin Mem Gimel, it says there, if a katan is ochel nevelos, ein beis din mitzuvin la'afrish. Okay, the child is eating food that was slaughtered of an animal that was improperly slaughtered. So the beis doesn't have a mitzvah to stop them. They're a child. Aval aviv mitzvah, so the beis din doesn't have that. Aviv mitzvah ligorbo, but a father should. Be very careful here. You should yell at your child. Now, I'm not sure you have to yell, but you should give them that look like this is not appropriate to do if they're violating a Torah prohibition. A Torah prohibition that you see your child violating at a certain age. You have to use a little bit of chokhmah. You see a 1-year-old doing something that bad stuff. They have really no idea of what they're doing at 1. But once they're 3, 4 years old, again, I don't know if you should yell at them, but you should stop your mitzuvah l'hafrisha. You should take it away. What was that? You admonish them. Right. You don't have to yell at them. Right. So you can admonish them. Ulahafrisha. But most importantly, you have to separate them from whatever action they're doing. The isur de'oraisa. What they're doing is a de'oraisa. Okay? So if it's a derabanan, you see them violating. I let my kids, I teach them, but I always keep this siman in mind. Sometimes when they've done things when they were younger, 2, 3 years old, if they're doing a derabanan, okay, you're not mitzvah lahafrisha. The moment I indicate to them that I'm happy with it, I don't try to make it look like I think what you're doing is cute, right? I ignore it because I don't want to again encourage the behavior of on Shabbos, right? But you're not allowed to encourage derabbanans being violated, but you have to actively remove from their hands if they're doing a deorais. If you're going to actively give it to them, right? The nevela, asur afilu dvarim she'asurim midivrei sofer. Even if it's only asur midrabanan, you can't encourage, in a violation of a derabanan. And now it comes back to Shabbos. V'chein aser lahargilo b'chilul Shabbos. You are not allowed to, habituate their chilul Shabbos, umoed or yom tov. V'afilu b'dvarim shehem mishum shvus. Even if it's a derabbanan, you're not allowed to actively do that. And there, some say that this is only with regards to a child who hasn't gotten to the age of, education. So then you must separate them. And some say okay, there's the rest of it talks about other things related to a child. But bottom line is you are not allowed to have your child. You're not allowed to tell. You're still allowed to tell your child. Turn the lights on. I can't turn the lights on. No, better. It's a question. Better take your elbow and go like this if it's such a desperate situation. You do a shinoi. To ask your children to do something that you can't do is really complicated. And I'm very surprised, honestly. I don't remember learning this part. I learned this part of Hilchot Shabbat 10 years ago.
I think maybe because the Isser here is
The Isser is nothing. That's really why. But if it's really not, I think that's Rich is correct. You already said before here, if the non-Jew is not available, so do it yourself. So don't do it yourself. The child, but I'm not sure why the child is better. That's the problem. Meaning, if you're worried, then the child also should be. That's the rabbanon for the child. The child's the rabbanon. So let them. I don't know. By the way, to hold up a baby next to my pet peeves, hold up a baby next to a light switch also doesn't help. Because you're actively getting the child to do it. I'm not the one who's this. Is
using a human shield.
Yes, correct.
In combat.
You're using it's like a spiritual human
like
shield. But that's right. Exactly. So bottom line is, he says, if you can get a child to do it, don't do it as yourself. I'm not sure that really is adds up.
First of all, if it's a 1-year-old, you're not going to get a 1-year-old touch it.
At the oven, right?
Yeah. Even if it's a 5-year-old, you're not going to touch it.
Right. Right. And certainly once they're at the age of, I don't know what you're doing here. Sabaz, to Hinda's, reaction, this is a very bad education for the child.
Right.
Now,
It's so true. Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Everybody I know,
I can't stand.
everybody I know who used to use their kids to.
Oh,
Shabbos,
horrible.
their kids
and
were-
it's a Doraisa violation, not for the child, really for the parent.
Yeah.
It's different. If you ask a non-Jew to do it, okay, your Isser is only the Rabbana. It's not good, but
Yeah,
it's
I remember when I was a little kid, I remember the parents telling their kids to turn on the TV for them or something.
right,
All those kids today are all.
See it. I see people saying,
Yeah.
right,
It's
Turn
really
off the
bad
light.
training.
right.
It depends how old. If the kid's 11 years old, that's an issue. To
We-
3-year-old, yeah,
you're
no, I'm not.
teaching the kid
No,
to do
no,
something you
Right.
can't.
I'm not
you're
justifying
allowed.
it. I'm just saying the kid probably won't even remember that.
You're right. You say they're 3-year-old, but again, you don't want to habituate. You don't want to habituate.
My parents never did it to me. I never did it to my kids, but it's
Can't stand it.
it's different when the kids.
Right.
like this
I'm
and
gonna
what's-
do this, but-
Yeah.
It's me crazy when I see it.
But take a look at the last part of this phrase here. Be'im EF shar, back to the Ravan. Be'im EF shar. Now you got no options. Your child's not available. You don't have the non-Jew available. Yaseh gadol al yedei shinoi k'tzas. This makes the most sense. We're worried that this is maybe not even anything. So you're worried that it's something. So take your elbow, a shinoi, you do something in an abnormal way, and you'll bust through with your elbow through the clay covering, which is not the normal way to do it. And this is what most people do, is to do a shinoi when they are needing to break through this. Again, we don't have this kind of oven set up today, but this was what they did. It seems to be the practice of most people. Let's take a look at, actually, let's keep going here. Venire li, it appears to me, says the Rama, ha de mutter lachazor v'listom hatanor, that you can, that which is permissible to return the food and to close up the oven again. Hainu bayom, that's just during Shabbos day. The kvar hakol hakaderos muvushalos kol tzarka, because everything is fully cooked.
Right.
Now, I'm going to put out there, just remember the Rama's position about shehiyah, about food that's going from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. That's on a heat source. He says as long as it's kamachal ben drusai,
Right.
that it's partially cooked, minimally cooked, that a bandit named Ben Drusai would eat it if he was on the run from the law. but it wasn't fully cooked because he didn't have enough time to stick around to cook because they realized the wanted sign had the wanted poster had a picture of him on it. So just think about that because here he says all has to be fully cooked when you return it back. When it's near to the time and when it was originally hidden in its heat contraption, atmana. Maybe the food is not fully cooked. So when I take it out and I put it back in, this thing is not fully cooked when I put it back in. So aser listom hatanor, because then it is prohibited to close up the oven. Forget the clay, by the way. We're not even talking about the clay here. De gorem bishul, because you're causing it to cook. Kamosha disbar siman Reish Nun Zayin Sif Daled, as it says in Reish Nun Sif Daled. And there it talks about if it's not fully cooked, same thing basically. You're not allowed to add, another covering to something, right? On Shabbos, so if they have a hatmana situation, then you intensify the hatmana over the heat source, which will cause it to cook or hasten the cooking, I should say. That is not allowed. So that's the Reish Nun Zayin reference. Vafilu al Yehudi Asr, and even by a non-Jew, you're not allowed to do this. Can't ask a non-Jew. Commotion is bar leil sof sim and Reish Nun Gimel talks about over there about not asking a non-Jew to do certain things for you. So what's going on here? Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Gimel. The yesh suffik. That was the language of the Ramah. There's a suffik about if it's during the nighttime, returning the pot back to the situation in which it was previously. He says, I knew afilu im ein oyodea shekenu. Maybe you don't even know the truth here. Maybe it is fully cooked. So it's already a suffix. So yesh lo lochosh lazem mistama. So if you're not sure, then your default assumption, mistama, means like by default, your assumption is that it's not fully cooked at night. If you know during the daytime it's not fully cooked, you also can't return it. But during the daytime, the default assumption is that it is already cooked. It was cooking all night long. It's like your cholent that was all over, on the crock pot the whole night, something like that. That's okay to return. Chaf dalid. Okay. Asr listom hatan, or you're not allowed to close up the oven. The aliyde stimas piv. Because when you close up the whole of the oven, even if it's not with the clay covering, we didn't smear the clay covering on top. Mosif home, it increases the heat. And now it will hasten the cooking. And even if you had the coals were raked to the side or out, or you covered the coals with ashes, and so the heat is not as intense, and you've prepared the oven, right, in a way that you can't adjust the fire, the flame, you're not allowed to put the food back in because the food is not fully cooked. The ima tanur, and if the oven is not prepared properly, you did not rake the coals out or cover them with ashes. Usrli Yisrael lisosmo, a Jew is not allowed to close up the oven. This is relevant, by the way, even if you have some sort of it doesn't have to be an oven in our day and age. It could be you could put it on a hot plate if it's not fully cooked. You have an intense hot plate that gets to a very high heat, and the food is not fully cooked yet, and you put it on Shabbos. This is what they're describing here. So also Yisrael afim hakaderos kvar mifushalos called sarkami v'ojom. So here he's saying you can't return it because even if it was fully cooked, because that's a separate problem of it was not goru fakotum. And in order to do chazara, in order to return food back to the heat source, it has to be goru fakotum, which is a way of controlling for the temperature changes, right? That way I don't play with the kol shema yechata begecholim and raise the temperature. Now he says here, the balayla mistama, but at night the default assumption is adayin lo nisakluha gecholim, the coals are not yet, what's the word for when coals are fully consumed? Is that the word, that they're just consumed, that they've gone out? They're They're equal is like, when you talk about it in terms of a person, it's digested. So the food is the coals here are fully burnt through. So sorry, adain lo nisaklu, they're not burned through yet at night. But lo chashosein, they're burning with fervor. They're whistling, or they're that whistling sound. They're the yesh chashash kibui al yedei hastima, and therefore by closing the oven, you are going to cause the coals to go out because now there's no oxygen flowing in this contraption.
Can we back up a bit?
Yes.
Something's occurring to me that's been troubling me for a while. This clay thing that you're putting on, I always envisioned it as like a hard cover.
Yes, yeah.
But now what something you're saying about smoothing it over, I mean, is it?
It may harden. I mean, it's clay.
Well, when you can't put on a non-hardened clay on Shabbos, you'd be forming a cover.
So correct. That's why you can only do that Arab Shabbos.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
Arab Shabbos. Yes, we're talking about smoothing something here. Yeah.
Put something back on, we're talking about hard piece, something that's.
Here in this case, it doesn't even, you have to get to the clay because just the covering of it's like closing something where you're hastening the cooking. But if you were to reclose it on Shabbos, it would be with whatever exists still with this original hardened now situation, because to smooth the clay on Shabbos would be a separate problem. Yes, 100%. Okay.
It's difficult to do because we don't have these type.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to envision. it.
Yeah, our appliances are very different. Yeah. Yes, here it looks like they're making contraptions on top of the whole of the oven in order to retain the heat.
It's a very good point. It's hard sometimes to relate because.
100%.
Different technology.
I bet you Steve Keller's on here right now. Steve Keller and his Mishnah Berurah. See, I'm a traditionalist like this. I don't have pictures of mine. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, Steve. He probably has a picture of it. I bet you, right? No picture. Okay, all right.
No pictures.
Okay, no picture. He had on the other ones, which were very helpful, by the way. What these ancient ovens seem to have, at least by description, seem to look like.
We're trying to extrapolate.
Yeah.
All these restrictions
To our situation, right? Yeah, that's why I'm saying. I think today, if you have, if you want to do chazara, let's say with a cholent pot, let's say you took a cholent crock pot off and you serve it and you want to put it back. So we talked about some of the conditions that you have to have.
There's no flame in it. There's no coals in it.
Right. There's a heating coil as a coil.
Little, an outer pot that gets hot, and then the inner.
The insert gets hot.
Outer thing slips into it.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to relate, but.
Right, how it all fits with this. Yeah, that's the key, is to learn the rules, then then we apply it to our modern day situation. Take a look at Chaf Hey. Okay, he says here Shagor and Bishul. This causes cooking. Okay, if it's not fully cooked, partially cooked, and I put it back and I close it, now I'm cooking. That's an act of cooking on Shabbos. Even after the fact, you're not allowed now to consume the food like the law of the person who cooks on Shabbos. And he says, take a look at Shin Yud Chesef Aleph, where it talks about what do you do with the food if someone cooked the food by accident on Shabbos. I'll just remind you that the Mishnah Berurah paskins like the Vilna Gaon, which is funny that he doesn't mention this here, who says that if b'shogeg someone cooks, not purposefully, that after the fact you can rely on the most lenient opinion in the Gemara, which says that you could still eat the food. It's not you can't just if it's still bemazed or it's done with more intention. Of course not, but we'll get there with Shin Yud Aleph, Shin Yud Ches.
The hot plate was plugged in, and you put something on it.
Just give it space, right? You need space, right? And then it just cooked, but it cooked, not just heated up, it cooked.
Yeah.
That right. So b'di'evet, So the one case I'm aware of, it didn't happen here, actually. It was a case I heard of when I was living in Washington Heights. I guess some of the people didn't know better, and they saw their cholent was too watery on Shabbos morning when they woke up, and they stuck some barley into it. That's cooking. It's like mamish cooking. But they didn't know, they didn't understand some of the rules. They knew enough, but they didn't. I don't know. They got confused in the moment. So if it was really b'shogeg, you could allow the cholent to be consumed. If it was done on purpose, like you just don't care about Hilchot Shabbat, so you go, the person knows better that they're just not observant and like that. So then you shouldn't eat it. The Vilna Gaon Pascha like, I think it's Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah in Shabbos. But that's not, it's in the Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin like that. But the Mishnah Berurah pulls it out as if you're in a situation where you need a kula.
But did the Vilna Gaon go with that kula, or he was machmir?
I assume that he was a man of his word. If you look at Mishnah Berurah here, let's skip ahead to Shinyan class. He talks. This is Sifkat on Gimel, because if it's the Mavashal b'Shabbos, the Mezid Asr Lalom, La'acher Moto Say Shabbos, B'Shogeg Asr Bavayom, if it's by accident Bavayom, and Gam La'acher, you can only have it after Shabbos is over.
But that's if it has Ben Drusai, at least, right?
If it's Machal Ben Drusai, we'll get there. Hold on, that's a good question. Hold on. If it's not cooked at all, right? So the Grua says Sheherich Lochiach, the Kulei Alma Im Asa Osa B'Shogeg, Ein La'asor B'Diavad Lahanos B'Mena. Mishnah Berurah, he says this is the Vilna Gaon would say that if it was B'Shogeg, you don't have to say that a person is prohibited from eating this food on Shabbos. Yes. So let's get to that in a second, Tommy, what you just mentioned. Last part of this Mishnah Berurah. We haven't reached the point of Ben Drusai. The Higia, because if it's got to the point of Ben Drusai, ain't less then you shouldn't have done it because it's cooking still. But to not eat it, we're going to be lenient because it was at least partially cooked. But this is the point here. Even though the Ramah says that once it's partially cooked, you can allow it to continue cooking into Shabbos, that's because you're not doing anything active to it on Shabbos. Right. But to then put it back on a flame or into an oven or something on Shabbos when it's only been half cooked, 3/4 cooked, that is still cooking the rest of the way. And that is a biblical prohibition.
Saying you can't
Well, no, because it's not fully cooked yet. If it's not fully cooked, it's still cooking. Cooking is one of the third malachos, so you can't do it on Shabbos. So even if it's,
he's saying if you put it back, then it's a problem.
Yes.
But if you take it off,
if you take it off, you can eat it. Half cooked food.
No, I'm saying this was a time when food was not as plentiful as it is today.
That's true. That's true. And he's trying to say here, if it wasn't already at least Ben Drusai, this half cooked, third cooked, when you put it back, and now you're like, well, okay, I made a mistake. You take it out, you can eat it on Shabbos. Should have done it, but you can eat it because it was at least partially cooked already. In terms of the rabbinic decree, they took it easy on you on this one because you must have made some sort of calculation error. You already had it partially cooked, so they're not machmir, at least on this particular one. It's not yet in play.
Not yet in play. You have to reach a certain point of bishul.
Fully cooked. Right. Cold sarka, the way it would always prepare it, it's cooked. Yeah. Okay. Last comment here of and then I gotta stop because I have to run this to a conference that starts in 18 minutes. But even by the hands of a non-Jew, this is not allowed. Hastima, to close it out of the oven. Even if you forget the clay, forget the smoothing out the clay. Because this hastens the cooking. It's a cooking issue. It's a deoraisa. Certainly you can't tell them, and then on top of that, you can't then tell them to cover it with clay, to smooth it out with clay. The yesh bazem mishum meleches memarech. This is memarech. It's smoothing out a substance on Shabbos. That is not allowed, as Hinda was mentioning before. But also, even if the oven was closed before, you can't on Shabbos ask a non-Jew to violate d'oraisa for you. So you can't ask them to smooth over a clay covering over this oven. Now, what about after the fact, though? You shouldn't have done it, but now let's say you did it. If they did this stima, they closed it, they hastened the cooking. Nope, it's fine. You'll eat the food. Because their actions didn't help so much. Because at the end of the day, they would have cooked. You'd hastened the cooking, but at the end of the day, the non-Jews' actions didn't help so much. Therefore, you're benefiting from it on Shabbos is not so much, and therefore will allow you to eat the food. Okay. The Achronim say that even in the summertime when we daven early and we get home from shul and there's still some light out. It's not dark on that when we walk home from shul here at the shul. 7:00 is davening nowadays. I walk home. It's still light when I'm walking. And it's not yet ben hashmashos, not yet twilight. And the prohibition at this point is only midrabanan. Because you accepted Shabbos on yourself, it's only midrabanan the isur. If you violated the oraisa at that time, it's not the oraisa. It's really only the rabbanan. Not saying you should do it, but still also midrabanan. Even so, you should not tell the non-Jew at that time, which is only a derabanan issue, to close up the oven. You say, what do you mean? It's a derabanan. Is it derabanan by a non-Jew? It's makom mitzvah. What's wrong? Yeah, what? Yeah, come on. It's even better than Ben Hashmashos. It's not Ben Hashmashos. It's before Ben Hashmashos. The Yavolomar Galo. Why? Don't do it. Because the Yavolomar lo gamba chorif. Because then you'll get used to saying it. And then in the winter, when you're not taking Shabbos in early, you're going to go over to your neighbor who's not Jewish, and you're going to start saying, "Oh, it's our weekly tradition. Come, I need you to close my oven. I forgot to do it again." And in the winter, you'll do it. Now you're in the winter when you go home from shul, it's dark. Yeah, it's after Shkia for sure. Maybe it's already close. It's close to 3 stars. Then you're gonna wash your hands and you do kiddush. By the time you get to telling the non-Jew, can you cover the oven? You're coming home from shul right before Pesach Kochavim. You're gonna wash your hands. You're gonna make kiddush. Then you're gonna realize, what's gonna happen? Actually, you're gonna take the food out. Then you want to put it back in, but I can't put it back in. I took it a little bit now. The non-Jew will do it. No problem. You call over the non-Jew from next door. It's already actual. Really, it's Shabbos now for sure. All right, we'll stop here. I have to go. Next time we're going to probably might even take the entirety of the time. We're going to read the Mishnah Berurah's summary on all the laws that we've talked about, Shehiyah, Chazara, and Atmana. That, by the way, as the Ramah ends here, it says, Sha'ar dine ha'chazara b'Shabbos, ayin lekaman simin shin yuches. There are some more halachos in regards to Chazar. We'll get to them when we get to Shin Yuches. But we're going to do a complete summary of everything we've learned really over the last year. And in a very lamaisa way. He's not going to go over things that are not as relevant. And so that we'll do next time. And we'll begin Dinei Hachnas Shabbos. We'll totally switch gears to welcoming in the Shabbos. We're going to talk about the mitzvah of showering, bathing before Shabbos. That's actually a mitzvah. The mitzvah of preparing yourself, dressing nicely, getting your house ready in a certain way. It's all a mitzvah. So we'll pause here and wish everybody a good day.